Hello. Last week we looked at the yeast, which were the non-filamentous single-celled fungi. This week we're going to be looking at other fungi. Most of them are going to be molds. There's one yeast on there that we saw last time. So what we're going to do is we're looking at, I think, 6 different ones. Your lab manual has about 9, but we're only going to use 6 of them because that's all that we have. So you'll be given, hopefully, you'll have a plate of the particular microbe. Now this time they're actually going to be numbered instead of named. So the idea of this lab is that you're going to actually have to identify what it is based on their characteristics. Now when we looked at the yeast, we looked at things like, were they budding, do they have sexual spores, are there fission yeast and things like that, looking at their shape and different things. For the molds, you're going to be looking at mostly their spores and how they form their filaments. Now remember we talked about the different groups of asexual and sexual spores. We talked about sporangiospores, which are the ones that were enclosed in that sac, like you put a little helmet on your head, okay, and then there were the ascospores, the Conidial Spores, which are the ones where they're not enclosed in a sac and they just kind of shoot off the top of that aerial hyphae. So we're going to be looking at those as well as the sexual spores. You know, there's the zygospores where they form in that sac around them. Not so much a sac, but you see the 2 filaments coming together and then they're inside of that when they fuse together, the positive and negative cells. And then the ascospores where they're actually literally what looks like a sac. And that's similar to what we will also see with some of the yeast if they have sexual reproduction. So with the yeast, we looked at their sexual reproduction, asexual reproduction, budding, things like that. And with this, you're going to be, and we also looked at fermentation. So fermentation of yeast was a way of also identifying them. That's not what we're doing with the mold. With the mold, you're going to identify based on the characteristics of how they look on a plate, and also the characteristics of how they look on a slide, whether or not what kind of spores that they have, sexual and asexual. So this is kind of a 3-part lab, just like the last one was. These also take a while to grow, so they're actually going to be a week before you look at them a second time. So like I said, you'll be giving a plate with them, but also a tube with the particular fungi. Now remember, they're going to be numbered, and it says 1 per student. With some of the smaller classes, we might have 2 per student so that we are able to look at all of them. So basically your goal is to try to identify it without knowing what it is. Okay? Now, so for this lab, the 3 things that you're going to be doing is looking at them on the plate, looking at them under the microscope, and also looking at them after they've grown for a week, and looking at them under the microscope. So let me rephrase that. The first day you'll look at the regular plate, and possibly even in the tube you could look at it under the magnifier. And then after you have put them on this plate and grown them for a week, then you're going to look at them microscopically. Oh, just mirror. Yes, lab 2, make wet mount. Okay, so lab 1 is pretty simple. You're actually going to be simply looking at the plate, inoculating, and then the second time is when you'll make the wet mount. But we're going to go through all of it today just because I have all the supplies here. Okay, so as with what we always do, I'm going to get the flame ready. This time it's not falling over. Okay, so for the part with the flame, for the first procedure, you're going to be putting it on the plate, and you'll notice that it says not to spread it or anything. So what you're going to do, now we're going to assume or hope or pray or wish, whatever the word is for it, that the mold actually grew. A little steamy. That the mold actually grew in the tube. Okay, so you're going to do what you always do. Use your Sterile Technique. Oops. A little bit hot there. Okay, you won't do that, will you? All right, you guys have learned that what I do in the video you don't do in class. You actually do the proper technique. And then it says to just gently place that in the middle. Okay, and that's it. You don't spread it, you don't push it down. The other thing is the word gentle needs to be emphasized, because the spores themselves will break and the hyphae will break, so you want to be gentle because you don't want to disrupt that. And you'll probably notice when we look at the yeast that it spreads pretty quickly. So what should happen is the mold should actually grow from that center point, so it should spread out. That's why you don't spread it, because if you spread it all over, you just end up with this huge plate full of mold. Okay? The other thing that I want to point out is with this, they do have spores, so I want you to be careful as to not agitate everything too much. You don't want to break the spores and have them going up in the air and things like that. So that's for the inoculation of the plate. And for this one, we're going to put in the incubator at 25 degrees for a week. And it, just like we did with the yeast, you're not going to invert it, you're going to leave it right side up. Okay? Now what you'll do also, okay, that's the first day's procedure. So the second day, so the second week, you're going to actually be looking at the plate that you grew. All right? So this time you're going to use the dissecting scope. So it says to look at it with a hand lens. These work just as fine. These dissecting scopes, you may or may not have used them. And basically they have a main switch that turns the light on. And then they have two smaller switches here. One turns on the middle light, the bottom light, and the other one turns on the light on top. It's up to you which way that you want to look at it. Be aware that there may be some condensation in the lid, so you may have to try to look around the condensation to see it. With these dissecting scopes, they're pretty simple to use. This right here is the knob, like the course adjustment type of thing. I don't know, it brings it into view. Okay? This one right here can actually increase the magnification, but it's not going to increase it like much more than 20 to 40 times. And so what you're going to do is look through here, and you're going to bring it down until you can see what you're looking at. And I'm going to look at this one because it actually has something on it. And you're going to go down and you're going to look at it. And once again, you're looking for, if you can see hyphae, if they're aerial hyphae, if they're vegetative hyphae, you're looking for spores and things like that. You'll notice in the key here in the manual, they talk about the color of the colony, the color of the spores. With molds, you'll see like a fuzzy appearance to them. So that's what you're looking for with the hand lens. Once again, this is what you're going to do the second period after yours has grown. Okay? Also during the second period, you're going to be making a wet mount of your slide. Now, I don't think I need to go through this procedure again. We did this last time. You're going to use that lactocotton phenol blue solution, and you're going to put a drop of it on there, and then you're going to tape a loop full of your colony from the plate that you had grown, and you're going to put it on there. And then you're going to put the cover slip on just like you did last time. Okay, so this, even though this is in one video, it's going to go over a 2-week period, so you might have to watch this video a second time next week just to make sure you're doing all the procedures. So the first week, all we're really doing is inoculating that first plate.